Hello, girlinas. Today we will be reviewing slash critiquing David Cronenberg's latest film, The Shrouds, starring Vincent Cassel and Diane Kruger. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. So, I will be using a little bit of psychoanalysis to bring a critical perspective to the Shrouds. It is not necessarily a horror film, but it does have body horror elements, and it is a David Cronenberg film, so it is fun to nitpick and psychoanalyze a little bit. A bit of a synopsis first. The Shrouds follows Karsh Relish, played by Vincent Cassel, Black Swan, a grieving widower and a tech entrepreneur who owns a high-tech cemetery that allows users to connect with deceased loved ones through interactive burial shrouds. These shrouds contain embedded sensors and live stream feeds from inside the graves, turning mourning into a digital experience. The film explores the limits of technology, loss, and obsession as Karsh, Vincent Cassel, uses these innovation to maintain a disturbing connection with his late wife. The first section of our psychoanalysis is the notion of the doubles, right? Drawing from Jacques Lacan's notion of the other, the Shrouds engages with horror motif of the double. Often, women in horror films are doubled in subtle visual ways. This idea was popularized by none other than horror pioneer Alfred Hitchcock in his film Vertigo. One is blonde and the other one has brown hair. And further developed directors such as David Lynch in Lost Highway with Patricia Arquette. These doubles are often played by the same actress. Patricia Arquette wears a blonde wig and a black wig, meaning different women, but ultimately they're the same, but one has a subversive side. Andrei Shulowski's Possession, we see Isabella Gianni with black hair, older, and then the other or the double wears a sort of like brunette hair. These speak to the fractured self, the duality of the human identity, and the tension between the conscious and the unconscious. In this case, we see the alive and the dead. Diane Kruger plays identical twin sisters. One is dead, one is the wife of Vincent Cassel, and the other one is, the sister. One is blonde, and the other one is brunette. The uncanny, popularized and theorized, I should say theorized by none other than the father, not so much the father, but, Sigmund Freud. It does play a role here. Something is familiar, but at the same time alien, causing discomfort, but at the same time desire. Lacan's mirror stage develops further by introducing the other as the formative mirror of selfhood. The idea that our identity is shaped not in isolation, but through the gaze, desires, and projections of others onto us. So the Shrouds taps into this concept with its repeated use of visual doubling and psychological fragmentation. The second section of our psychoanalysis is the use of technology. David Cronenberg uses technology and has been using themes of technology and how it relates to our body, whether it is through body horror or trying to predict the use of technology in the future, right? So, this section is called the intersection of technology with corporality, cognition, eroticism, and the dream state. A lot of you cinephiles may know David Cronenberg's Videodrome, which is his masterpiece. It's David Cronenberg par excellence. It is basically a foundational text for understanding the relationship between body horror and technology. Series like Black Mirror, Videodrome's Legacy. Without Videodrome, I don't think there would be any Black Mirror. Technology invades the human body and mind, raising anxieties about surveillance, control, and selfhood. The Shrouds updates this concern with a more intimate frame. The technology is ostensibly helping process his grief. However, it also creates a disturbingly psychosexual relationship with his dead wife. Karsh explicitly mentions his need to be physically close to her body, verging on, yes, necrophilia. Like Max ran in Videodrome, Karsh's relationship with the digital shroud becomes both erotic and self destructive. Honey, Honey, this film's Siri-like AI avatar assistant deepens this discomfort. At one point of the film, she replicates the wife's scars and amputations and does this kind of like sexualized dance for Vincent Cassel's character who created this avatar, making it questionable how technology relates to our loss or our grief, or how technology is helping us, quote unquote, or is it dehumanizing grief? Even Guy Pearce's character, Maury, introduces yet another layer of discomfort and anxiety, but by saying at one point in the film, I can access your dreams, I know what you're thinking, I know what you dreamt last night, because he is a very sophisticated hacker. So it raises questions of psychological vulnerability and its relation to the advancement of technology and where technology is going nowadays. Our third point of the psychoanalysis is misogyny in horror. Now, this has been a theme and it will continue to be a theme in horror as long as the horror genre exists. So it is nothing new. We've seen it and we will continue to see it in horror films. The Shrouds participates in a long tradition of horror films that fetishize and mutilate the female body. Directors like Dario Argento, Brian De Palma, Alfred Hitchcock, David Cronenberg, and Gaspar Noé have repeatedly used women's bodies as battlegrounds for male anxiety, fear, and desire. Laura Mulvey's theory of the male gaze, visual pleasure, and narrative cinema, written in 1975, explain how classical cinema positions women as objects of visual pleasure for the typical cisgender heterosexual male viewer, reducing them to passive spectacles rather than an active agent within the film. Vincent Cassel's character, his wife's body is shown repeatedly undergoing surgical changes in these dreams. Each time she returns from the doctor, she has a new amputation. Her arm is cut off, her left breast is cut off, she's in crutches. Both of these characters in these dreams are naked, and she often comes from the doctor, amputated, but always already available for intercourse. The horror not only lies in just death or decay, but in the repetition of the female body as a passive site for male grief, loss, and so much projection. Barbara Creed's notion of the monstrous feminine is also relevant here. The wife, though diseased and dead, becomes both a fetish object and a source of abjection. Her transformation reflects the tension between desire and revulsion that defines much of body horror. I have to say that films like The Substance, that are written and directed by women, critique the male gaze in a really, really great way that we do not see in cinema very often. We see Demi Moore's naked body. It is herself that she is critiquing, and we see how the male gaze affects her. She is lonely. She doesn't have a family. She doesn't have her parents. She doesn't have a partner, children, or anything to tell her that she is good just as she is. She has the male gaze, and she needs the male gaze to see herself worth. Dennis Quaid's character, pretty girls should always smile. They give you a very critical point of view of what the male gaze is. Margaret Qualley's character, Sue, the way that the camera operates and sees her body, and the way that they show the camera looking into her body, her ass, her boobs, her hips, everything. It describes the male gaze really well. That's why films like The Substance are really important. Continuing with our psychoanalysis, not so much psychoanalysis now, but this is more of the racial and political undertones in this film that felt like the script had 90s element when talking about racialized people. The Shrouds is dense with political dialogue about international relations, climate activists, immigration, surveillance, so much that it feels intentionally disorienting. Through the film, Karsh suspects a range of groups for the vandalism for his graveyard. Maybe it's environmental activists, maybe it's the Chinese government, Asians in general, and finally, the Russians. The narrative shifts blame rapidly, creating a general atmosphere of xenophobic paranoia of these people trying to get inside. This mirrors Western anxieties about the other, particularly non white, non Western bodies and ideologies invading the sanctity of safe spaces. Whether intentional or not, the film seems to reflect the fear of cultural contamination, political infiltration, and immigration presence, suggesting a Latin nationalism or techno paranoia embedded in the characters' world view. My final critique is the whodunit giallo aspect. Giallo, not so much in the sense of a murder, but vandalism and question. Was the sabotage caused by Honey, the AI assistant? Was it Murray, Guy Pearce, his business partner, the professional hacker? Could it have been Diane Kruger, but the sister who's alive and who is brunette? Or his romantic interest Sumi. The film leaves the answer ambiguous, which reflects Karsh's own psychological unraveling. The deeper he goes into grief and digital obsession, the less clear the boundaries between reality, technology, and projection. The culprit may not be external at all, but internal. So, one last bit and one very important bit here is that David Cronenberg's films tend to be autobiographical in some way, um, that really create these nightmares and dreams based on real life events that have happened to him, his family, his loved ones, right? Autobiographical influence and Cronenberg's legacy with The Brood, 1979, one of my favorite horror films of all time, famously climaxed with a gruesome scene of a woman revealing the form pregnancy, a metaphor for the director's real life divorce from Margaret Henson. And now in 2025, The Shrouds similarly feels like an autobiographical exorcism. The film comes after the death of Cronenberg's wife, Carolyn Seidman, with whom he was married for 38 years, right? So here, Cronenberg is not just only exploring grief, but he's dissecting it, performing it in a ritualistic way through horror, body horror, AI intimacy, and technological resurrection. It is not just a film about death, it's a film about the futility of trying to control, preserve, and eroticize death, which is really effed up. But that's why we love Cronenberg for who he is, right? While Videodrome was saturated with visceral body horror and psychosexual spectacle, so the Shrouds feels more restrained, calmer. It is a very slow film and almost stoic by design. It is very much, I feel, his intention compared to Videodrome, right? His tonal shift appears deliberate, as if Cronenberg is intentionally pulling back from sensationalism to dwell into a quieter, more philosophical terrain. The film is 95% dialogue, not a lot of action. And so it feels like a deliberate decision to write a script and say, okay, I'm going to tone it down and really portray what grief is, which is such an unsatisfying thing with no resolution. In contrast, his son, Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool 2023, starring, contemporary scream queen Mia Goth, embraces the grotesque and the uncanny with a heightened sense of visual and bodily access, pushing Lacanian themes of the other to the extreme, right? By comparison, the Shrouds resists catharsis, resists this kind of like climax. It's all very contained, very subtle, very stoic. It avoids a clear resolution, particularly in its treatment of grief. The film suggests that mourning is not something to be solved or overcome. It lingers unresolved and suspended. The mystery surrounding the vandalism of the cemetery and the death of the doctor who had an affair with Karsh's wife remains intentionally ambiguous. In this sense, the film mirrors the psychological state of its protagonist: fragmented, obsessive, not really okay. Ultimately, the shroud remains Ultimately, while the Shrouds may seem like a departure in tone, it remains deeply Cronenbergian at its core, marked by body horror, technological anxiety, complex entanglement of desire, grief, and female sexuality. Rather than to shock, the horror lies in the quiet refusal to offer comfort. That is my review critique of David Cronenberg's latest film. If you enjoyed my annoying voice, I invite you to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.